Hello everybody, my name is Latoya Pemmican. I'm from Deer Lake First Nation, and today we are going to learn how to make beaded earrings. So this style of beading, I'm going to use a technique called the 2-needle method, and with this type of beadwork, it's called a freestyle, so there are no like gems or cabs that we are going to bead around. We are just going to focus on our line work of beading and just finding what tension works best for you and just how to get the beads as flat as possible. So to start off, we're gonna need some scissors. I have a scrap piece of moose hide here that we're gonna use as our backing. I have some E6000 glue that we are gonna use to stick on our findings. And for findings here, I just have a fingernail post that we are gonna use for the back of our earrings. And then I just have size 11 seed beads here. I have my beading needles. I prefer John James size 11. And then we have some paper here just drawn with a little flower design that we are going to be using today, and then a piece of pellin. I have one cut here already, so I'm just going to sew it together. So as you can see, it fits nicely onto my pellin, my paper, and we're going to go ahead and just stitch this on. This part doesn't really matter too much how you sew it on. You could do it anyway, but for me, I just like to go from front to back, pull that all the way through, and your knot is gonna stop it from just coming right through. And then you're gonna have to kind of move your paper around just so it sits nicely, and just hold them together while you sew. And again, I went from front to the back, and now we're gonna go from the back to the front. So once we have all of our pellin and paper and our design attached, we're gonna go ahead and start the actual beading. I like to work inside out, so I'm actually gonna start with my center here, my little circle. So this is really gonna put down the outline and the starting of our beadwork. So what I like to do is I like to start off with one needle just to start my little circle here, and I'm actually going to start right in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and poke a hole just right in the center so that I just have a starting point that I can see. And another thing, if you're a beginner and this is your very first time beading, what you're going to want to do is put paper on both sides. That's another little trick that I have. I don't have extra paper here, I would have done it. But this just ensures that every time you poke a hole, you can see it from the back. And we are gonna actually begin our beading. So I'm gonna take yellow. I have my little reference earring here. We are gonna do a yellow circle. And the way that I like to do mine is I like to just take one bead and put it right in the center here. So we're gonna go down right beside our other starting point here where the needle came up in the beginning. We're just gonna go down right beside it. And as you see, our little bead is just gonna kind of lay flat by itself. And then what you're gonna wanna do at this point is you're gonna come up beside it. And this next row of beads, I like to do 7 beads because that's just how much fits around 7. And for this next part, you can just you can actually just go ahead and go through that same hole that you came up, but I myself like to do a little extra step just to make it sit nicely. So I'm actually gonna go through the first bead here, just a single bead. I'm gonna go through that, and what this is gonna do is actually gonna ensure that your beads hug the one bead. It's just another extra step that I like that makes it a little bit easier for me. This part's a little tricky. You're gonna have to find a way to hold it. Again, it's all up to preference how you would like to hold it. But I kind of like hold the beads down with one finger, and I tighten my thread and push it down as close as I can get it. And then I'm actually just gonna go straight down to where my thread came out. So I'm just gonna go straight down and tighten that. So as you can see, our beads are kind of hugging the one. And then we're gonna go ahead and tack down. For this part, I like to tack down every single bead. So we're gonna come up on the outside of the bead here. You're gonna come up the outside, you're gonna pull your thread through, And then you're going to want to make sure that you go over the beads to the other side to tack them down. So you're going to go into the inner circle of the bead, and you're just going to pull it down so that it kind of goes over the beads in the thread, and it tacks it right down. So if you're noticing that they are bunching up, or that there's a lot of spacing, with bunching up, it means that you are pulling too tight. So you're going to want to kind of find what tension works for you, that makes your beads lay as flat as possible. But if there's a lot of spacing, you're not pulling hard enough. So you're going to want to pull just a little bit harder. So as you can see, this created our second row of beads. So we have our one bead and then the beads around. So we're going to actually do one more. This is what I like to do for like the center of all my florals, is I actually do either 3 or 4 rows depending on how big the project is. So once your needle is in the back again, you're gonna come up just right beside the row. So that's what I did here. I just came up right beside the row, and then we're actually gonna add and this is where we're gonna start the actual 2 needle process of beading. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick up all my beads onto this needle. And the thing to remember with the 2 needle method is that one thread and needle is going to hold your beads, and the other is going to do all the tacking. So you're going to want to make sure that you're not mixing them up, because it can cause your project to tangle, and we don't want that. We don't want our thread overlapping our pellin like this. We're always going to make sure that we're going down and up, not around like this, just because when we cut it, you're going to end up cutting all your stitching off. So with this part, it's a little bit tricky if you've never done the 2 needle method before. You're going to want to make sure that you kind of know where your thread is all the time in your needle, just so you don't poke yourself, so you don't poke others. I have a bad tendency of actually pulling my thread too far, especially if I'm sitting with someone next to me. I've poked people like this before. So you're just gonna want to make sure you always know, you kind of know where your needles are. And so I have my second needle here threaded the same way that we did the first one. You're just gonna want to make sure you have 2 threads going along, and then just your knot at the end. So we're gonna go ahead and start again. So we're just gonna do the same kind of stitching method that we did with the first row. We're gonna come up one side of the beads, and then we're gonna go down the other, so that we're going over the beads and tacking them down. So at this point, I like to do every 2 beads. If you are finding that tacking down every one bead is better for you in keeping your beads flat, you can go ahead and do that. You're always gonna have to make sure that your beads are nice and tight. So what I like to do is I like to actually pinch the side here, and I use my thumb to kind of push my beads up as I go. And again, you're just gonna have to find what tension works for you at this point, because if you go too tight, again, it's gonna cause the bunching. If you go too loose, it's gonna cause the spacing in the beads. Same with our stitching, it can actually cause the bunching or the spacing, so you kind of have to figure out which one is causing the problem for you. So we're just coming up to completing our 3rd row here, and what we're gonna do is just continue doing every 2 beads. And then at this point, what I like to do is I'll take my beading needle here and thread, and I like to go up the last 2 beads that were our starting point. So go through those last 2 beads. This is just to ensure that our beads kind of lay nice and flat, and that they connect well, and that there's not a big space where you would begin and where you would end. So after I go through those 2 beads, I'm just gonna go down and come out the back of our pellin here. We're just gonna pull that nice and tight, and then we're just gonna tack down the remaining beads that we had to do. So what I like to do is I actually just like to use my nail like as a natural guide, and I'll just kind of poke it so that my beads can lay nice and flat, and that I'm just pushing them out a little bit. So we're completed our centerpiece here, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually go on to the petals. So at this point, we're just gonna take again our needle and our thread, the one that we're gonna use to hold our beads, and we're gonna come up at any point. So I just like to start at the end of a petal here. So I'm just gonna come up right against our yellow beads here, as close as you can get it. And you're just gonna pull that through, and then we're gonna move on to our outline. So I have these shiny pink beads that I like to use. When I do my florals, what I like to do a lot of the time is I like to do a shinier and then a more matte color in the center. This is just my preference. If you just want to do one whole color, that's fine. If you want to do two, or even I've seen others do like three, it's just all preference. So I'm just gonna pick up a couple beads. I'm not too worried about counting my beads at this point. So you're always gonna want to make sure that your other the needle and thread that you aren't using is kind of off to the side, and you're also holding it at the same time. So I just like to hold it with my pinky here, and then I like to use my index and my thumb to just pinch the corner and push my beads up again. So it's kind of you're gonna have to kind of find a way that you like to hold it. This is just the way that I do it. I'm not saying this is how you have to do it. It's just finding the way that's more comfortable for you to bead. And I feel like this is the reason why a lot of people don't like doing the 2-needle method. They just haven't found a comfortable way that they like to hold it. So again, we're just gonna start from the beginning here, and I'm gonna actually use my finger to just push it to where I want it to sit, and I'm gonna come up the left side of the beads, and then I'm gonna go over to the right side of the beads and go back down. So with this stitching, you have to be a little bit more mindful of how close together you're stitching, because you're gonna want to get your needle and your thread as close to the beads as possible. This is just to ensure that it's not too loose, because if you're stitching too far from each other, you're gonna notice that your beads are gonna move around a lot. So you're gonna want to come up as close on the left side as possible, and then as close to the right side. I like to restart the whole process here, just because we want to keep it as nice and flat as possible, and just keep our lines nice. Keep our lines as straight as we can. So as you can see here, our beads, we had just enough beads to fit right onto our line, our design here, and then we're gonna go down the end of our bead here with our needle, our beading needle and thread, and we're gonna come up right beside our last bead here, and this is just gonna start our new line. So again, I'm just taking this shiny pink color that I have, and we're gonna go right to the end. So as you can see, I went a little bit over, so I'm just gonna take off a couple beads here. So I just added our beads here, and what you're gonna notice as you do more petals is that all the time you're gonna want to leave from the beginning to the end. When you're first adding your beads, you're gonna want to leave at least a 1 bead space from your end, because this is just to ensure that we're leaving space for our stitches, because the stitches actually do take up a little bit of space on your line here. So we're gonna go ahead and just start again, coming up one side and going down the other every 2 beads. If you are running out of thread, you're gonna always want to make sure you leave at least this much length here. That's just to ensure that you're able to knot it off. And you're gonna notice that you're gonna go back and forth with changing your thread, because you do have two sets of threads this time. So I'm actually just gonna knot both of them off. And again, I'm just gonna create a little circle around my finger, and I'm gonna come up the back side of our little circle here, I'm gonna keep it tight, I'm gonna pinch it down, and this is how I'm gonna tie my knots. So then they're both secure. I'm just gonna cut the excess off. And then again, I just like to use my lighter to really burn off my excess here, and just to ensure that they will stay knotted. So at this point, you can just take a new needle and thread and just restart, and just keep going back and forth till you complete your outline here. So after you're completed all your outline here, this is how it's gonna look like. So we're gonna go ahead and actually move on to the filling in. And with this, I like to do 2 rows of my shiny layer. So I'm actually just gonna go ahead and add those 2 rows in, and then we're gonna fill it in with the lighter pink. So again, I'm just gonna do the same method with 2 needles. I know some people at this point like to switch, so sometimes they'll do the outline with the 2 needle method just to ensure that it's nice and tight, and then they'll go in and fill in with the 1 needle. I like to do it with my smaller pieces like this as well, but I'm just gonna continue to show the 2 needle so that I can show you guys how to do it. So again, I'm just gonna come up right beside one of my lines here, as close as I can. And I'm gonna go ahead and pick up some beads here. So it looks like it's actually gonna fit perfectly. So I'm gonna go ahead and start stitching with my other needle and thread that I have here. So again, just going every 2 beads and pushing my beads up as I bead, just so that they lay where I want them to, and that there's no big spacings between my beads. So again, coming up one side of the beads and going down the other. With this part, you're gonna see that your beads are gonna always want to go away from the other ones. So what I like to do again is just use the natural curve of my nail to push it against the beads as tight as I can. So with this part, if you are using this little trick to use your nail, just be sure that when you put your needle up, you're not poking your finger or between your nail. I've done that before and it really hurts. So just like being mindful of where your needle is going at all times. And this has completed our first line, so we're gonna go ahead and do the other side. So at this point we're done adding our second row here, and because the space is so much smaller now, I'm actually gonna go in with 1 needle just to fill it in. If you find that you prefer the 2 needle method, you can just continue and do the 2 needle. But just for me, when it's a smaller space, I just like to go in with 1 because it doesn't tangle as much. So it's just like the same idea. You're gonna first off come up where you want your beads to sit, and I know that I've used 6 here, so I'm gonna try 6. If it fits, I will use 6, but I will go down to 5 if it doesn't. At this point, you can decide if you want to use the same color or if you want to use a second. I just like the way it looks to me, so that's why I'm doing a second color here. So I picked up 6 beads, and I'm gonna see if it fits where I want it to. So as you can see, it fits kind of 2 right on, and we always want to make sure that we leave a little space for our stitching. So I'm actually going to take off 1, and you can see that there is a tiny bit of space between the last bead and the second row of beads here. So that's what I like to see, just because we need to leave space for our stitching. So I'm actually going to use my needle to go down the end here where I want my beads to sit. So I'm just going to tighten it like that, and then I'm going to go back with the same needle and just stitch it. It's a little easier just to do 1 needle with this part because we're only doing a couple beads at a time. So But if we were doing an outline with one needle, it would be a whole completely different process, which is why I only like to do this for the filling. So again, coming up every second bead. And as you can see, that space that we left at the end here, it's no longer there because the stitching actually pushed our beads. Every time you do a stitch, it pushes your beads a little bit. So that's why we always want to make sure we leave a tiny bit of space at the end here, especially for smaller spaces like this. And also with filling in, the way I like to do it is I like to go side to side to side. You can go up and down, you can do a circle and just slowly fill it in. So it looks like there is a little bit of too much space for my liking, but a whole bead won't fit. So what I'm gonna do is look for a bigger bead that can take up the space, because even though these are size 10 seed beads, a lot of times there are like a little bit of thicker ones that you can kind of pick out. So I found like a thicker bead that could take up the space, and it actually does. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. The same process that we were doing. We're just gonna place our beads, we're gonna come up, and because we only have 4 beads on here, we only need to do 1 stitch because I'm stitching every 2 beads. So I'm just gonna go down right the middle here. So at this point you can see that there's a tiny bit of space that a whole row is not gonna fit. So if you're facing this problem as well, I like to just come up the bottom of where that space is. We're gonna take 1 bead and we're gonna fill it in just by 1 bead. So we're just gonna tighten, and you're gonna see the bead kind of lays and squeezes right in. So it looks like I can actually fit 1 or 2 more. So instead of side to side, we're laying our beads up and down just because it fits a little bit better in this space. That would be too tight to put a whole nother row in. So again, just tacking down 1 single bead, and you're gonna see it's gonna fit nice. So it looks like I could do 1 more. This is just a filling technique that I like to do if there's too much of a big space that I don't like. Last bead here, and you're gonna see it's gonna just squeeze its way right in. So at this point, this is how we're gonna fill all of our petals. We're just gonna continue this thing, as well as the leaves. It's the same process. You're just gonna make your outline and fill it in. I just did the petals only for today, just for time's sake. So we're gonna go ahead. This is 1 complete petal. We're gonna go ahead and tie it off now. So after you've done all the filling for your earring, you're gonna end up with something that looks like this. So what I did is I actually did another row of white beads just around, just because I wanted to ensure that I was doing as tight stitching as I could, so that when I go around and cut it, I'm not cutting any of my stitches. If you feel like you need to, you can go ahead and leave some space. I'll just kind of cut off this little part here so that you can see what I mean, so that when it's time for you to cut out your earring when it's fully beaded, you kind of have an idea what to do. So what I like to do is I like to go, if you kind of look to the side, if you look from the side down, you can see where all your stitches are. And you're just going to want to make sure that when you're cutting, you're not cutting too close to risk cutting your stitching, because if that happens, it actually loosens all your bead and they could fall off. So I like to go as close as I can without cutting my stitches. And it's okay if there's a little bit of space left. So I like to use the end of my scissor just to really get in the corner here, so I'm not risking cutting all of my beads off. And then we're gonna go ahead and just kind of put our scissor into that corner and then cut up. So this part can be like really intimidating, but just take your time. A lot of times I'll just do a rough cut, and then I'll go ahead and go in and just clean up my cuts here. So this is how we're going to cut out our whole completed earring once it's done beading. And then you're gonna end up with something like this that's nice and cut out. So as you can see, we didn't cut any of our stitches, and if you look really closely, you can see there's a space, a white, that have no stitching at all, and that's what we want to see when you cut it out, just so that you're not risking cutting any of your stitching off or any of your beads. So at this point, what I did is I actually take one of my fingernail posts that this is the part that's actually going to go into the ear to complete the earring. So you can go ahead and take one out of your package. You can use any kind of finding. So even if you don't want to do this type of finding, you can just leave it off completely and then glue it onto your backing. And to use a hook finding, which is one that you actually attach to the edging of your beads. But for today, and just for the size of these earrings, they are a little bigger, so I like to use a fingernail post just because it provides that extra support onto the ear. So when you're at this point, what you're gonna do is you're gonna just take your finding, and you're gonna see that this back here is nice and flat. So what I like to do is I'll take an old scissor. I don't have one with me today, and I don't want to ruin any of the scissors I have today. But what you would do is you would actually just scratch the back with the end of your scissor, just to ensure that the glue really has something to grip to. And your beading piece actually is already really nice because of all your stitches create a kind of a groove in the back of your earring that your glue is really going to hang on to. So for this, I like to use E6000 glue. It's a super glue that holds very well, and I've never had problems with it in the past. So what you would do after you mark it up is you're gonna put a little bit of glue, not too much, just a little like light layer of glue, and then you're actually just gonna hold it down and leave it to dry overnight. So that's what I did with this one. You want to let this cure and dry for 24 hours. And at this point it's nice and secure. And then we're gonna go ahead and add our backing. I have moose hide here, so I'm gonna go ahead and add our backing so that eventually it'll look something like this. So what I like to do at this point is I like to actually fold my leather piece in half and just put it right up against our earring here to make our marks where we're gonna cut it. So if you are having trouble just kind of eyeballing it, you can make sure that you're using the inside, you're folding the outside in. If you want to mark it with a pen or a pen or a marker, cut a little bit of a slit, and you're gonna see we have a little slit here, and it's really tiny and it's not gonna fit, but I just like to do a small one just so we're not cutting it too much. And then I'll actually take my scissor and I'll go through that slit just to make it a little bit bigger. So this just ensures that I don't make it too big. And then we're actually just gonna slip it on between that slit here, and you're gonna see it comes out very nicely. And I just like to push it down so that it comes out like this. And then we're gonna go ahead and add another little hole at the top for our earring, our earpiece to come through. So what I like to do is I like to push it down just so that it makes a little mark on the inside of where it wants to come out. So then I'll just put this back, and then I'll kind of open it, and then you can see there's a little kind of a dimple where that earpiece is gonna go. With this part, I actually use either a leather needle or an awl. I forgot mine today, so I'm just gonna cut a little nick. But I prefer to use a needle or a awl just because it creates a little hole instead of a nick. But if you don't have that with you, you can just make a little tiny nick in the leather, and you can kind of push your way through. So you can see it comes out nice like this. So we have our findings secure inside our earring, and then we're gonna go ahead and glue the leather piece to our beadwork. So I'm just gonna take a little bit of the E6000 again. So this is why I feel like making earrings takes a lot of time, because especially if you're using glue, because it takes so long to set, and this glue actually has a very strong odor. So you're gonna want to make sure that you're not working with it too close to your face, especially when it's drying. You're gonna want to let it dry, and the scent goes away after it dries. So you just want to make sure that you're not working with it while it's still wet. So at this point, again, we're gonna cut out the earring from the backing. We're just gonna cut all this excess off here. And again, just taking that same technique of just cutting right up to the end of our petal, and then we're gonna kind of move our scissor and just kind of go along with the So again, I have my tiny scissors here too if I ever need to go in and clean up. And with these scissors, there's actually a little curve at the end, so it's very nice to just go in and clean up after I've made my first cut. So there you go, we have all of our excess cut off here. And then we're gonna move on to the last step of completing our earring, which is actually just doing the edging of our earring here. There's many different techniques that you can do for this part, but I'm gonna show you that the technique that I like to do, that's my favorite way to do it. So for this, we're just actually gonna use one needle and one thread. So we're still gonna make sure that it's double threaded and that we have a knot at the end here. There's a lot of different tips and tricks that you can do within this technique as well. I know a lot of people don't like their knot showing, so they'll actually hide it between the leather and the piece of beadwork. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to go between this piece of leather and only go through the pellet. And this is how we're going to hide our knot within our beadwork, because eventually it's all going to be attached and nobody's going to see it. So with starting off this process, I actually go every 2.5 beads. So I'll come up 1, 2, and then on the third bead I'll come up in the middle of it. So we're going to start off with 4 beads, but this time we're going to go through the leather and through the beadwork piece and come up from the back to the front. So we're just going to pull that right through, and that's going to kind of make it attach itself to each other, so that we're sewing all of our pieces together now. And then at this point, you're going to see our bead kind of hugs the back and our thread is at the front. So we're going to come up from the bottom to the top of this last bead here. We're going to go ahead and pull that tight, and you're going to see your beads kind of sit nice flat against our 2 pieces here. So at this time, instead of 4, we're just going to continue doing 3 beads every stitch that we do from now on. So we're going to go ahead and take 3 beads. We're going to come up again about 2.5 beads away, coming from the back to the front. We're just going to pull that through. You're going to see that your beads are going to just hug around. You're going to come up from the bottom to the top of your last bead here. And this is one of my favorite edging techniques. I just really like how it looks. And as you can see, the beads that you are stitching through kind of sit up and the other one sits side to side. So we're just going to continue this process all around our piece here, picking up 3 beads at a time. So when we're coming up to our last stitch here, we're actually only going to pick up 2 beads this time, not 3, because we're not going to restart this process. We're just going to go put our needle down through our last bead here. So from the top to the bottom, we're going to push our needle and our thread through the beginning bead that we first started with. And this is just going to complete our edging here. And the reason that we only picked up 2 is because all of the other ones only have 2 here. So we're going to pull that through nice and tight. And you're going to see it kind of sits nicely. So if you ever need to change your thread during this process, if you run out, you're just going to do the same thing. You're just going to go, so you're going to come up. Like say this is your last stitch here, you're actually going to come up that last bead here, and then you're just going to tie a knot on top of that last bead, and then to restart you're just going to come up that last bead and just continue on. So we're at the back here. We're just going to tie off a knot using that same technique of pinching it to get our knot where we want it to sit. And then we're going to snip off our excess here. We're going to take our lighter and burn it right through, and I'm just going to hold it down for a second, and as you can see, it's nice and secure and it won't ever just untie because we melted it all together. And this is our complete earring here. So from the back you can see all of our edging, and this is how it looks completed. I would just like to thank everyone for taking the time with me today to learn how to make beaded earrings. I hope your experience goes well with trying to create a pair, and I just want to thank everyone. I just also want to mention that a part of my teachings is that I'm really thankful for all that I've been taught. I come from a long line of strong women, and I just want to really acknowledge my great-grandmother here. This is my grandmother's mom. Her name was Virginia Meekis. I learned a lot from her growing up. I was blessed to have her in my life, my early years of my life. So I just wanted to share, last summer I was given the opportunity to learn how to tan deer hide. So I have it here. This is half of a deer hide that I did with a number of different people that were willing to share with me. And I just wanted to share that we were actually able to recreate this photo here with me and my great-grandmother. She was an avid hide tanner, and I just really wanted to acknowledge her and just thank her for everything that she has done for me in my life, and just share the importance of revitalizing a lot of our cultural teachings that we have that may be getting lost, and just really ensuring that we're able to carry on these traditions to pass down to future generations. So again, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to learn with me and to listen to me. Miigwech.